I heard one of the greatest love stories ever right here at First Church, the story of Joy and Rod Botts. If you go out into the garden in our courtyard right here, you'll see a garden spirit sculpture from Rod and Joy in the spirit of joy. Joy and Rod were married for 58 years and deeply in love. They traveled the world together. They were leaders in Unitarian Universalist congregations together. They had a marriage of true minds. When I met Rod and Joy, Joy was already well into her journey with Parkinson's and dementia. Rod was her full-time caregiver, and while he was grieving her mental absence, he was still grateful every day for her presence, for her life. Now, Rod is a humanist, and I am a theist, a difference he remarked on a few times when I first arrived. But when Joy was sick, Rod wanted to tell me that he had a glimmer of what he might understand as God. Rod loved Joy so much that taking care of her felt transcendent to him. The most banal, imminent, immediate, grossly physical caretaking acts felt holy. I have to care for her in every way, Rod told me. I even have to help her go to the bathroom. And he explained to me that that was where he felt God the most. In wiping Joy's bottom, Rod felt the presence of the holy. Now, Rod might have expected this to startle me a bit, but instead it made me cry, and it still does. Because, of course, Rod is right. The beloved, human and divine, is there in our most profane moments, our most concrete, physical, bodily functions, and when we care for one another in the most painful and humiliating, the most intimate moments, the holy is there. Caretaking work is holy work. Love someone through the muck and the poop and the phlegm and the blood of illness or birth or death. And you will see the transcendent. In the immanent, the sacred and the profane, you will see God in the right now love of the messiness of the body. Caretaking is messy, hard work. It's rough on the body and on the soul. And giving in this way can open up new avenues of intimacy and deeper love, and yes, the divine. Caring for one another is holy work, and it blesses giver and receiver alike. The blessing of love, the blessing of giving creates a feedback loop of care and abundance and belonging. There are long philosophical debates about whether altruism exists or not. Do we really help others to help them? Or do we just enjoy helping because it's an action that makes us feel good? Does it matter? Recent studies have shown that people really do help others with the goal of helping the other person, not just the goal of making ourselves feel better, indicating that altruism is real. Feeling good is an unintended side effect, but it's a lovely one. You don't have to feel bad if it feels good to help someone. Helping doesn't have to be like the miserable self-sacrifice of the giving tree in order for it to count. In fact, that dopamine hit, that feeling good that comes from giving to another person, creates a positive feedback loop that encourages more giving behavior, which is a good thing. When we practice generosity and we like it, we're more likely to be generous again in the future. Generosity, feeling good, strengthens the practice of generosity. It doesn't cheapen it. It helps us move from generosity as an idea to generosity as a practice, to generosity as one of our values, and eventually to generosity as our way of being in the world. I am a generous person. We are a generous family. Our community is generous. For Rod, with joy, his giving care to her, the overflowing generosity of his love, it wasn't an idea. It wasn't even a practice. It was simply who he was in the world with joy. Studies also show that we are more likely to help others when we feel higher levels of empathy for the other person. Sadly, human beings are less likely to feel empathy for people who are different than they are. But when we connect with another person, when we imagine their experience and understand their humanity, our empathy increases, and therefore our generosity does as well. Marginalized communities are less likely to experience empathy from people in mainstream society, and they are therefore less likely to experience generosity, care, and support in crisis. This is true of Black women in the emergency room. It's true of developing people in developing countries who lack clean food and water. And it's true of both Jewish people and Palestinian people in the current crisis. One of our Jewish congregants shared with me how it hurt that our Unitarian Universalist Association's president's statement mentioned justice in decrying the October 7th attacks by Hamas on civilians in Israel. Unfortunately, I did not understand right away. Our Unitarian Universalist identity is so committed to justice that I didn't get why that would be hurtful. But I listened, and I learned that our congregant felt like saying justice in the same statement as saying no to violence felt like it was implicitly blaming the Jewish people for their own deaths due to the occupation policies of the state of Israel. The hurt came from the deep and long pain at the lack of empathy for Jewish death. The idea that torture and terror and death of Jewish people didn't matter, or worse, that it was their own fault. We live in a larger world that is callous to Jewish suffering because of deep and ugly, centuries, millennia-long anti-Semitism. It's important right now to open our hearts with compassion to our Jewish siblings who are suffering and who are feeling the vibrations of that millennia-long anti-Semitism and oppression in this moment. It's important to say that Jewish people matter, and Jewish suffering matters, and Jewish death matters. It's important to say that the attacks on October 7th are shocking, and they should be shocking and horrifying to everyone. During the Israeli state's relentless and retaliatory bombing campaign in Gaza, I heard something similar from Palestinian people. That the question, what did the Palestinians think would happen after Hamas's attacks, sounded like the Palestinian people were responsible for their own deaths. Dr. Hala Al-Yan wrote an op-ed in the New York Times asking, "Why must Palestinians audition for your empathy?" Dr. Al-Yan writes, "To earn compassion for their dead, Palestinians must first prove their innocence. Palestinians are presumed violent and deserving of violence unless proved otherwise. Their deaths are presumed defensible unless proved otherwise." As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that all lives are inherently worthy, that each human life is sacred. And here in the United States, where our democracy has been flirting with fascism, we surely understand that people are separate from the actions of their rulers, that not all actors in an area are the same. We also have been able to witness that anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are on the rise here in the United States. The war in Israel and Palestine is stoking the fires of hatred, and it is our work to resist that hatred, all of it, and any stereotypes that come along with it. In this moment, we have to flex our capacity to deal with complexity, not through shutdown or silence, but through simultaneously being able to do a power analysis, which changes with geography and social location and access to resources, and holding the very real humanity and suffering and trauma of our Jewish and our Muslim siblings. All human beings are human, not caricatures or stereotypes of humans, but humans with long histories and different experiences and access to power, different behaviors and responses to grief. We must practice now analyzing power honestly and also holding on to our empathy for the suffering and grieving human beings with whom we are in relationship. Empathy naturally leads us as human beings to actions of love and support. When we look into the eyes of a crying child, we can see our children. When we witness a bereft mother searching for her children, we can see our mothers. Real witness, religious witness of suffering can lead us to actions of love, lead us to call for an end to the violence, an end to the death and the suffering, lead us to call for a ceasefire now. I do not know how to solve this conflict. I do not have the surprising magic formula in my back pocket for how to solve this suffering that no one has tried yet. But as a longtime peace activist who said no to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, I do know how to say, stop the killing now. No more. No murder, no killing civilians. Stop the bomb. Ceasefire now. And I pray with love and compassion and humility and absolute clarity about the full and equal humanity of my Jewish and Muslim, Israeli, and Palestinian kin, that we might use our resources not for war, but to fumble our way together towards a just peace. There is a feedback loop of love here, too. When we act with love towards a community, when we are generous with our resources and use them to alleviate people's suffering, we increase our sense of connection to those people. Empathy-induced altruism, the field term for practicing generosity, changes attitudes. It changes the way we feel about marginalized people. When empathy increases our generosity, helping feeds back into an increase of positive feelings towards the people that we helped. Generosity, that loop of giving and receiving, increases our feelings of connection and our actual connections. We get closer to one another through acting with love. Even more, when we remember all people's humanity, it helps us remember our own. Allowing ourselves to feel the natural human instinct of empathy for suffering instead of suppressing it gives us access to our full humanity. Dehumanizing people, it's hard work. Dehumanizing people requires propaganda and language and thinking that characterizes human beings as barbarians or tyrants, as wild animals or evil oppressors. Resisting those stereotypes can keep us in touch with our full hearts, our full integrity, our full humanity and awareness. It can be painful because it means grieving for everyone, which is a lot. But it is better to stay whole as a community and as individuals than to cut off pieces of ourselves to participate in the erasure of pieces of humanity. It's a natural human instinct to feel empathy for people who are suffering, and for that empathy to lead us to generosity. The world might try to suppress that instinct for its own gain, but given free rein, human beings will have compassion for suffering. We will help when we can. And we will feel good when we do it, which creates a positive feedback loop of love and connection to other human beings, bringing us closer to one another and closer to our own humanity. This feedback loop of giving and receiving increases our humanity and breaks down that persistent illusion of separation. There are no other people's children, and there never have been. As James Baldwin says, the children are always ours, every single one of them, all over the globe. What would the world be like that if we were to remember that all the time? What would the world be like if we acted on it? Last month, when the Strelitzer family had their terrible car accident, I saw a glimpse of that world. This community responded to that tragedy like those kids were our own. I heard again and again how much you all empathized with the whole family and how much you were thinking especially of Milo and Jonas. From that empathy, from that sense that these are our kids, you have given generously. On the meal train and the GoFundMe, you've sent cards and shawls and love. This community responded to crisis with love, you said, this family is ours. And they are. Of course they are. They're deeply embedded in this church at every level. And I also want you to know that in the moment of trauma, when the accident happened and none of us were there, strangers on the street reacted like this family was theirs too. Bystanders rushed in, tending to both Anna and Tristan until the paramedics got there. Strangers lifted Milo and Jonas from the car, and they took them to the side and comforted them while the people tended to Anna and Tristan. Random people on the street saw human suffering, and they rushed in with love, acting like there are no other people's children. It fills me with overwhelming gratitude and hope for our human family every time I think about it. The Strelitzers are making their way through the terror and the trauma of the crash, held in love, held in community by strangers and friends alike, people who are responding to human suffering with generosity and empathy, treating them like they are their own. And here in church, we've gotten to experience the joy of that. The way it's brought the community together. We've had the joy of getting to witness Anna heal and recover. The joy of having Tristan and the boys with us at church doing their own recovering. And that feedback loop of generosity, it feels good. It has brought us closer as we all get to celebrate their lives and the love of community and the possibility of healing. Just this week with the news that Anna could make a full recovery. May the practice of giving bring us joy. The kind of joy that comes from real repair and recovery, the kind of joy that celebrates life surviving through grief and terror and trauma, the kind of joy that comes from deeper and wider connections in circles of empathy that expand to include all children, all over the globe, all the time. May we give generously, breaking the barrier of the illusion that we are separate, and know that we are one people, one humanity, held in a larger love that holds us all and knows us each by name. May it be so, and amen.